Outreach training is a big part of the North Carolina Department of Labor's efforts to ensure workplace safety. The purpose of this video is to educate workers about the hazards associated with green tobacco sickness, how it occurs, and how to prevent it. We know that most growers and workers want to do the right thing, but may not know what the right thing is. Should you have any questions after viewing this video, please do not hesitate to contact the Agricultural Safety and Health Bureau for assistance. Thank you for making safety a priority on your farm.
North Carolina produces more tobacco than any other state in the United States. Much of this tobacco is hand harvested. In North Carolina, farm workers begin this hand harvest in July. Many have never worked in tobacco before and are not familiar with green tobacco sickness, nor are they familiar with North Carolina's hot and humid summers. This combination can prove hazardous. Two farm workers we talked with, Rosa Maria and Valeria, suffered symptoms that may have been caused by green tobacco sickness. Proper training may have prevented their problems, and they could have safely worked with green tobacco.
Tell us about your experience in working with tobacco.
I like working with tobacco, but the only problem is that when the tobacco is big and it begins releasing the nicotine, that's when we get dizzy.
Have you had other problems when working with tobacco, like getting a rash?
No, I have not had problems with that. But the second time I became sick, I was feeling burns. It was raining and the tobacco was wet, and I think that's what made me sick. I began having the same symptoms.
Volví a sentir los mismos síntomas.
Did you feel this immediately?
Yes, I felt dizzy and like I was going to faint and had a lot of vomiting.
Green tobacco sickness is acute nicotine poisoning. That's to say that you get nicotine in your body to the point where you get sick. The nicotine comes from direct contact with green tobacco plants, which have nicotine in them, or with the water that's on the green tobacco plants.
It has been estimated that green tobacco sickness is experienced at least once in a growing season by 1/4 of the tobacco workers in the United States. Those most likely to be affected are those who have no experience priming or picking tobacco.
Nicotine is both water soluble, it gets in the water, and it's fat soluble. It can go through your skin. So if you get wet from working in wet tobacco, it can go through your clothes, that water goes through your clothes, onto your skin, and you absorb the nicotine.
Hands don't absorb nearly as much chemical as underarms do. Underarms and foreheads are really places where if workers are wiping sweat, or they're holding the tobacco under their arms, or they're down underneath the plants harvesting, that's where they're going to be absorbing the most nicotine.
Well, I've been working here for about 13 years, and I remember when I first started, we had a lot of our farm workers come into our clinic, and they had symptoms like being nauseous, headaches, complaining of being dizzy out there while they were working.
The onset of the illness can occur 3 to 17 hours after direct contact with wet green tobacco. The illness may last from 1 to 3 days. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, dizziness, skin rash, and general fatigue or weakness.
So all 10 of you were vomiting?
Yes, all of us vomited, felt dizzy, and had headaches that would not stop, but we had to keep working.
When this was happening, what did you do?
Nothing. We just took Tylenol that we usually carry with us. This helped us make it through the day. The Tylenol would help the headache for a little while, but then it would start again.
Pues yo les pediría a todas las personas que se cuiden, ¿verdad?, del tabaco verde, que se protejan bastante.
I would ask everyone to take care of themselves from green tobacco. They need to protect themselves by using a shirt to cover themselves. They need to do this so they will not get a rash, especially in the creases of the body.
Las coyunturitas, de lo que es del tabaquismo.
Before someone knows it, they're vomiting, and at night cannot sleep because they feel the bed is going round and round, as if they were intoxicated.
Anda vomitando. Y hasta en la noche hay a veces que ni siquiera puede uno dormir porque siente uno que la cama se hace así, mire, a la vuelta y vuelta, como borracho.
Farm workers list a couple of symptoms that physicians generally don't see when they see a patient with green tobacco sickness, and those include insomnia and lack of appetite. These are things that I think occur once workers are back in their dwellings. and really bother them. They worry because they can't eat and they're too weak to work, and they especially worry about lack of sleep and not being able to work the next day to make money to send home.
One problem farm workers have is knowing when their symptoms are caused by green tobacco sickness rather than by heat stress or pesticide exposure.
Green tobacco sickness, from what we have seen, mimics a lot of motion sickness in a lot of the farm workers. I think some of the effects are more dramatic when it comes to pesticide poisoning or heat stress. So I would say just to look at the major 3 or 4 symptoms that we see and then kind of find out what they're working in at that time and actually what stage of the tobacco that they're working in to find out if that's more likely the culprit of what they're getting sick from.
So what you need to look for is, are you working in a field to which pesticides have recently been applied? If that's the case, it may be pesticides. But if it isn't, and you're feeling nauseated or vomiting, if you're getting very dizzy, if you're getting a headache, that probably indicates that you have nicotine poisoning or green tobacco sickness. You have to take a work history. You have to find out what fields they've been working on. If they haven't been working in tobacco and they have these symptoms, it's not green tobacco sickness. It's either heat or pesticides. If they have been working in tobacco fields, then you have to ask them how much they've been drinking for the heat stress part of it. You have to find out from the grower if pesticides were recently applied in that field and what pesticides, so you can look at what would be the symptoms of exposure to that pesticide. And once you've ruled out those other causes, then you can go to green tobacco sickness.
This happened to me one time, and I began to feel dizzy. I was walking up the steps to the house and felt like I was leaning to one side. Once I got in the house and drank some milk, I felt better.
What did you do when you felt sick? Did you drink something, medicine, tea, or did you do nothing?
Well, when I got home, I drank milk and cinnamon with chamomile. I drank a lot of it and it felt better.
When we talk to workers about treatments for green tobacco sickness, they list things like drinking milk or sometimes drinking lemon juice. And while those may hydrate them better, there's no reason to think that those are effective in counteracting the nicotine.
Even smokers get green tobacco sickness.
Home remedies, we've talked to many farm workers and they will say, well, I'll take milk. Things like that. They won't help you. They'll get more fluids into your body, and that's a good thing. So if you have green tobacco sickness because you're working in the heat, because you're maybe vomiting, you should make sure you keep yourself hydrated. Drink lots of water. Water is the best thing, followed by something like a sports drink like Gatorade, that sort of thing.
The recommendation that most of our providers give is to take like a motion sickness medicine like Dramamine, something like that. And when it's really bad, to try to take a day or two off to just let your body recuperate from the nicotine exposure.
Okay, if you have green tobacco sickness, you have to stay hydrated, and to ameliorate the symptoms, you need to stay out of the fields for a day or so. Once the nicotine's out of your body, you won't have the symptoms. Another thing you can do is take some anti-nausea drugs like Dramamine, which will treat the symptoms. However, you have to be careful taking those because it will make you drowsy, and if you're operating equipment, you could get into some trouble that way.
Well, I think growers should be interested in having a healthy workforce, and so preventing green tobacco sickness is one place to start. We observed that workers who are here for the first year are totally unacquainted with green tobacco sickness. So I think education before they start is essential. We don't want them to think that every time they have dizziness and nausea that they have pesticide poisoning. It's also good for them to understand how they might prevent green tobacco sickness.
On Pender Sharp's farm in Sims, North Carolina, workers do not get green tobacco sickness. Pender believes that this is because his tobacco harvesting is mechanized, and workers rarely, if ever, have to handle wet tobacco. He daily stresses safety issues with his workers, what he calls working smart. Even so, he offers solid advice to others as to how they can avoid green tobacco sickness.
There are lots of things that we can do to address green tobacco sickness. even in operations that are not mechanized. Now, we try to encourage our people to wear long sleeve shirts when they're working in tobacco. Everybody wears a hat. I'm real conscious of anyone that comes to work with sandals or flip-flops on, and we pretty much don't allow that. They need tennis shoes are okay. I'd rather have hard shoes, especially around the equipment, but we require everyone to wear some kind of shoes. So if you cover your arms and your legs and your feet, and you're wearing a hat to help with direct sunlight, all these things kind of help reduce any exposure you might have.
And it's also important for them to try to figure out how they can change out of wet clothes, whether that means taking an extra set of clothes to the fields with them, or it means trying to return to their housing to change during the day. Those are things that could help them prevent green tobacco sickness, and new workers won't know that.
Green tobacco sickness is nicotine poisoning through skin absorption. Prevent it by wearing long-sleeve shirts and long pants. If possible, wear water-resistant clothes and gloves. As always, wear closed-toe shoes or boots and wear socks. The time of day you work in the field is important. Try to work when conditions are dry. Be aware that foreheads and underarms readily absorb nicotine, so change your work habits to reduce that exposure. You will find rotating among different jobs can reduce the amount of exposure one has to wet tobacco. And be sure all workers have opportunities to rest. Water or other fluids, such as sports drinks, should be available for drinking. Field bathrooms and hand washing facilities must also be made available.
You need to use a long-sleeve shirt and drink a lot of water in the field to avoid dehydration. Also, try to eat good meals.
So if you wear normal protective clothing, you protect yourself from wet tobacco a little bit. Drink plenty of fluids. If you're working in the hot sun, take a break occasionally. All these things together help reduce exposure to green tobacco sickness.